Defense is simply not covered enough in fantasy football, especially IDP leagues, and I personally believe it is the true test of how much a fantasy analyst loves the game of football. So I'm excited to get into the top 30 IDP rankings for 2024, and I'll also do them once a week during the regular season, so make sure to stick around, IDP players. And I'm giving away free FFN hats right now, and the way to qualify to get one is to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me your favorite sleeper wide receiver pick in 2024. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know who your favorite sleeper wide receiver is. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page here. The way that we are ranking these players is going to be based on the IDP 1-2-3 scoring format. And if you're not familiar with the IDP 1-2-3 format, you get 1 point for an assisted tackle and a quarterback hit, 2 points for a solo tackle and a tackle for loss, 3 points for pass defended, forced fumble, fumble recovery, safety, block kick, 6 points for sacks, interceptions, and INTs, and then fumble recoveries and INT yards. Interception yards are 0.10 points per yard. So essentially what we can gather here is the guys who are getting a bunch of tackles, that's kind of your bread and butter right there. It's like getting receiving or rushing yards if you're a wide receiver or running back. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the first tier right here, starting out with Foyesade Oluokun of the Jacksonville Jaguars right here. Now with Foyesade Oluokun, this dude is a tackling machine if there ever was one created in a lab. I mean, Foyesade Oluokun literally is averaging 6.5 tackles per game, and that helps him boost his fantasy ceiling up to 16.2 fantasy points per game. He's also in the middle of the field, deflecting passes. He had an interception last year, a forced fumble, a couple fumble recoveries. Foyesade Oluokun is literally everywhere for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's still young enough, and in fact, they just re-signed him this offseason, $45 million deal. So this guy is always going to be their anchor for the next several years in fantasy football, and he is definitely still, in my opinion, the best fantasy football IDP player in 2024. Now, moving on to number 2, I've got Bobby Okereke of the New York Giants. Linebacker over there, very similar situation. He's kind of like their own version of Foyesade Oluokun. Bobby Okereke is so highly regarded in that New York Giants building. Like, he's like kind of known as that like stable, consistent leader on the defense. Like, they've got a lot of personalities, obviously. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau. Now they've got Brian Burns on the edge as well. So I think that there's a chance that this defense actually is pretty good in fantasy. And I think it all is held together specifically in IDP with a guy like Bobby Okereke, who, again, very similar to Foyesade Oluokun. Not quite the ceiling with 5.5 tackles instead of 6.5, but 10 passes deflected last year. Not a sticky stat in IDP for sure, but when we have that tackling baseline and we can have him make some more plays right here, that's when you see a 15.3 points per game type of ceiling for a guy like Bobby Okereke. Now, at number 3, I've got Zaire Franklin of the Indianapolis Colts, linebacker over there. Now, he's actually closer to Foyesade Oluokun on a tackles per game basis, and he also gets a lot of assisted tackles per game as well. So, like, this guy's floor is really, really high just based on tackles alone. Now, Zaire Franklin's known as a little bit of a talker, man. Like, he's definitely not shy with his words. Like, he's trying to get after CJ Stroud again. This dude's trying to get everywhere, so I like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good thing for your star linebacker to have. So, Zaire Franklin talks big, better back it up this year, but based on what he did last year and based on the age that he's coming into this year, I like Zaire Franklin in 2024. Now, moving down to our next tier right here, I've got Maxx Crosby to start out this tier, the first non-linebacker, if you have noticed, because again, tackling is the baseline of fantasy points we're looking for, so all those linebackers obviously have more value than other positions because they're typically getting more tackles than anybody else on the team. Now, Maxx Crosby, very unique combination of things. So with Maxx Crosby, as we get into some more pass rushers in particular, you'll notice here that Maxx Crosby's tackles per game are actually higher than most of them. Like, he's averaging 3.24 tackles per game. And obviously, this dude is getting a bunch of sacks, 14.5 last year. And the reason that he's higher ranked for me this year is because I actually think he's going to have a career year. Like, last year was great. I think we're going to see like a 16, 17 sack type of season. Maxx Crosby, we all know is an animal. Like, nobody has to tell you that Maxx Crosby is an absolute animal on the field. I mean, his own teammates are like, dude, tone it down a little bit in practice. The reality here with Max Crosby, why I like him so much this year, is because with Max Crosby, you're looking at a season with Christian Wilkins on the defensive line. That dude is going to open up so much and help Max Crosby on that interior by hogging up a lot of blockers. Like, guys like Christian Wilkins, I've been saying this all offseason, they don't make it to free agency. It's astounding that the Raiders ended up getting Christian Wilkins on the market. So Max Crosby is going to take full advantage of that this year. Mark my words. Now, at number 5 and 6, I've got my 2 defensive backs, Kyle Hamilton and Antoine Winfield Jr. Now, both of these guys, they're both, Antoine Winfield's more of a tackling machine just based on last year. Like, he obviously 4.5 tackles per game. Kyle Hamilton, not that far behind. Now, Antoine Winfield did average more fantasy points per game than Kyle Hamilton, and the reason that these two are above most defensive backs is because they're everywhere. They're in the prime of their career, and they're all over the field. Now, Kyle Hamilton, I'm just kind of believing that, like, he's going to take the leap and become the best safety in the league. Like, this dude, I think, is going to get more freedom in this Baltimore defense with Zach Orr at coordinator. So I think he's about to take over this defense and kind of become like their Troy Polamalu, who's just everywhere for them. So Kyle Hamilton, really big fan of Kyle Hamilton this year. Only thing we just need to please avoid is stop getting injured. Stop getting injured. They just avoided another injury scare, so hopefully they could keep him in bubble wrap or something like that. And then Antoine Winfield, obviously, like I said, tackling machine, just got signed to a new deal. This dude is ready to go for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's obviously going to be all over the field for them again as well. Now, rounding out this tier, Roquan Smith and Fred Warner here at the linebacker position. Now, both these guys have something in common. They're linebacker 2 of last year, who was really good, Patrick Quay of the Ravens, and Trey Greenlaw of the 49ers. They're both gone this year, won't be playing for the team. So obviously with Patrick Quay, he's over in Pittsburgh, and we'll get into him in a little bit later. So Roquan Smith, like, their new linebacker there, I'm hearing like good things about him, but obviously we can count on Roquan Smith, the all-pro linebacker, to really shore up that defense. Like last year, I don't think that really tells the full story because there was Patrick Queen having a great year for the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that without Patrick Queen there, Roquan Smith is the main tackle guy, and the new guy is more of the athletic playmaker, just based on what I'm reading. Now with Fred Warner here, obviously the problem with him is not that Greenlaw is off the team. He tore his Achilles in the most brutal fashion that I've ever seen in a football game. I mean, literally running onto the field from the sidelines for the 49ers in the Super Bowl and tears his Achilles in half. Horrible, man. Horrible. So Fred Warner, long story short, like he's going to be obviously Fred Warner is a great athlete and he's all over the field for them. I mean, 11 passes deflected, 4 picks, 4 forced fumbles last year. This guy's a playmaker for them. So with no Trey Greenlaw, he's going to have to pick up the slack. That's why I really like Fred Warner this year in fantasy in IDP. Now, this next tier here, TJ Edwards and Nick Bolton at the linebacker position are kind of 2 of my favorite guys, I think, that are younger guys that are going to take the leap this year. Now, TJ Edwards is not like super young. To be specific, he's an older guy, like he's 28 years old, but he's in his 2nd year with the Chicago Bears and immediately just came in last year and just shored up that defense. Like shored up the second layer of that defense right there. And he basically averaged 15 fantasy points per game, having about 5.3 tackles per game. And again, all over the field for them. 7 passes deflected. This dude was everywhere for the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears are going to be an improved defense again this year. I think they're going to be a really solid defense, and I think that part of it is because of TJ Edwards. Now, Nick Bolton is kind of my favorite young guy. There's a lot of things that are just kind of lining up for him, in my opinion. Young guy, Willie Gay is gone. That's a big loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, with no Willie Gay and just a younger guy coming into the season, hopefully fresh, it just kind of looks good for me with Nick Bolton. Now, the one thing, obviously, if you're paying attention to IDP, is Nick Bolton missed a lot of last year, and he's kind of missed a little bit of time here at the beginning of training camp, but he's back in swing right now. From what I'm reading, he's looking good again. From what I'm seeing, he's looking good. So I'm really banking on Nick Bolton having a big year in Kansas City and IDP this year. Now, I've got TJ Watt at 11, and really the thing with TJ Watt here, like, obviously, if TJ Watt was like 25, 26 years old, I'd be putting him higher. I'd be putting him above Edwards and Nick Bolton. The problem with TJ Watt, and again, this is kind of where I want to draw the the comparison to Max Crosby, Max Crosby is averaging over 3 tackles per game. TJ Watt is not averaging 3 tackles a game. TJ Watt averaged 15.4 fantasy points per game last year because he had 19 sacks. So you take away like 5 of those sacks, that number's a decent amount lower. If TJ Watt doesn't have a great year, as far as sacks go, it's like his fantasy floor is not that high. His ceiling's really high. Obviously, in IDP, it's really high. But there is issues like with an older TJ Watt, a guy who has not been like super healthy throughout his career, and just kind of the defense like all relies on him. So it's not like there's really anybody opening up lanes for him at this point. Cam Hayward is old. Their defensive line, other than Hayward, is okay. But obviously the good thing is Alex Highsmith, but he really, again, kind of plays off of TJ Watt, which is, again, what worries me about TJ this year. And then Terrell Bernard to round out this tier at 12. Buffalo linebacker, very, very athletic dude, and is all over the field for them again. Like, I could make the argument he should be higher on this list, actually. With Terrell Bernard, for almost 5 tackles per game last year, and really that was kind of the thing that was holding me back a little bit. Like, he averaged 15.1 fantasy points per game. That's because he had 3 picks and 3 fumble recoveries. Like, this dude was getting a lot of key big boom plays for the Buffalo Bills, and for IDP, good for like 1 year, but you can't rely on those things moving forward into the next season unless you're someone like TJ Watt, like a generational player. Terrell Bernard's not that. I want to see that tackle limit go up for him a little bit, and that's why I think his floor is just a little bit lower in IDP. Now, moving down to this next tier right here, Jesse Bates at the safety position is 1 spot over Danielle Hunter on that defensive line for the Houston Texans. With Jesse Bates, he's my 3rd favorite defensive back in IDP fantasy football, and it's because really this dude is everywhere for them too. Like, they signed him to a really big safety deal just a year ago, and he really immediately paid off. Like, not only was he getting 11 passes deflected and 6 interceptions, he was averaging more than 5 tackles per game, almost 5.25 tackles per game, and 14 fantasy points. So, like, this dude is all over the place for them. The argument that could be made is, like, maybe their front seven's better and doesn't let as many plays into the secondary. I don't buy it. I really don't buy it. Like, they've made patchwork moves. I like the addition of Matthew Judon, but he's more of a pass rushing specialist. So I believe it when I see it. I really like Jesse Bates once again, though. And then with Danielle Hunter here, Danielle Hunter has always been a really good player. I've always liked him when he was with the Minnesota Vikings. I think he's a ridiculously good player. I think what holds me back a little bit with him is that Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, who is really going to be the one who has the big year? And Danielle Hunter is in a situation where it's like, okay, on a 2-year deal, $49 million and $48 guaranteed. So, like, they want him to be there and be helping out. But, like, is he helping out Will Anderson, or is he going to be the lead sack guy? I don't know, but there's a lot of room for improvement. He's obviously got a higher ceiling than this for sure. Khalil Mack and Quincy Williams and Bobby Wagner at 15, 16, and 17. So with Khalil Mack right here, just another year older, in his 30s now, wondering what his upside really is going to be. Like, again, and I'm not doubting that Khalil Mack is an elite player, but Khalil Mack, like, definitely, I don't know if it's likely he's going to get 17 sacks again. Maybe I'm just a doubter. maybe I am. I mean, obviously, Harbaugh kept him over Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And we all know that Harbaugh loves defense and he values defense a lot. So there's definitely something to Khalil Mack. Like, nobody has to tell you that, right? Like, he's obviously a great player and he historically has been. But I do worry about just the age factor here and how long he'll hold up like that for a full season. But obviously, like, being in this mid-teens area, very good pick in IDP. Quincy Williams, I don't know if you'd call him the leader of the defense, but this is a very talented Jets defense, obviously. His brother, he looks just like his brother, Quinnen Williams. And Quinnen Williams is obviously a great defensive lineman. Hogs up a lot of blockers and lets Quincy Williams shoot the gap quite a bit. So Quincy Williams, I just think that is going to continue to shore this up, because not only does he have, like, a good footprint on the defense, but, like, having your brother at the defensive line, like, obviously you guys know each other's style of play and what y'all are planning and preparing to do. So I really like Quincy Williams once again this year. And with Bobby Wagner, like, I would ideally have him higher. He's a Hall of Fame player, but again, age. Like, this dude is old. This dude is not, like, he's not just like Khalil Mack old. He's older than Khalil Mack. He's been in the league for a long time. So I wonder, like, what his ceiling is now on another team with Washington. And I'm not doubting that he's a great player. Just the age factor just really kind of bumps him down a little bit for me. Alex Singleton at 18 and Patrick Quay at 19 to round this tier out. Both linebackers. Alex Singleton's been with Denver for a while now. Dude's older, but this guy is still the linchpin of this defense. In fact, he's really known as the leader on the Denver defense at this point. Denver went through a lot of changes in that entire defense last year with Sean Payton, as Sean Payton was kind of trying to figure out like who his guys were and who he was okay without. And Alex Singleton's been kind of the linchpin that's held it all together. Obviously, the dude's a tackling machine. Over 6 tackles a game, ridiculous. You're in like Voice-Side of Luakon territory. So again, higher ceiling than this, but I kind of want to see how their other players develop this year on that defensive side of the ball. And then Patrick Quay, like, definitely is going to be the tackling guy for Pittsburgh. What I do question is with their other linebackers, specifically Peyton Wilson, the rookie. I anticipating him starting at some point. The Steelers are usually slow at starting their rookies. Like, they're just old school like that. But with Peyton Wilson, I do believe that he's obviously the more athletic field stretching guy, whereas Patrick Quay is definitely more of the tackle guy. So I could see some fantasy upside being kind of vultured away from Peyton Wilson, but maybe I'm overrating Peyton Wilson a little bit too much, and Patrick Quay should be a little bit higher than this. Now at 20 and 21, we've got some pass rushers again. Myles Garrett and Aiden Hutchinson of the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions. Myles Garrett, obviously elite pass rusher, one of the best in the entire league. Problem with Myles Garrett, like I said with Max Crosby, he's not averaging more than three tackles per game. 2 tackles per game is a low bar. That's why with 14 sacks last year, he had 11.2 fantasy points per game, and Max Crosby 14.5 sacks, 14.1 fantasy points per game. Tackles are the difference here. And Myles Garrett just doesn't get him. So Myles Garrett, we need to have like a 16, 17, 18 sack season. Can he do it? Absolutely. Dude's a great player. But with that tackling floor that's just lower, we'll just have to see if he ends up doing that. Now with Aiden Hutchinson here, I'm really kind of just expecting a big year from Aiden Hutchinson. I'm kind of banking on it. Like, his rookie year did really well, had like 8 or 7 sacks that year. Improved it this past year to 11.5. I'm expecting, projecting, hoping that it's going to be around like 13, 14, maybe 15 sacks this year. All we really need him to do is hopefully get that tackles numbers up, but even if he doesn't, like getting 14 sacks per game, he'll be in that Myles Garrett territory if that ends up happening and he doesn't improve his tackling mark. Now, Ernest Jones at the linebacker position for the Los Angeles Rams, can't tell you how much I wanted to move him up. I wanted severely to move him up. Ernest Jones on a contract year for the Rams looked really good for them in action last year. This dude's been dealing with the same knee injury since like mini camp. And there's like no word on it. Like, what's happening with dude? We don't know. And Sean McVay's been kind of like iffy about it. So it worries me heading into the season. He is definitely a player that I would move up if I got some good information on him. And when we started playing, like by week 2, week 3, if he's doing well, then he's going to move up because his ceiling is high. His ceiling's really high. His floor is really high. But with this injury, man, it worries me for a guy like him who's on a contract year again. There's a lot of things that line up there for me. I just can't get there right now with Ernest Jones. Now, dropping down to our next tier here. Josh Hines-Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars and Derwin James of the Los Angeles Chargers. Josh Hines-Allen, formerly Josh Allen, if you knew who that was, pass rusher for the Jacksonville Jaguars, had a good year last year, got his contract, got everything lined up with him. My question ultimately with Josh Hines-Allen is like, this is one I do have a real question about. Was it just a season where he wanted the big contract? I question it way more with Josh Hines-Allen because Josh Hines-Allen, like, he's been okay, he's been good, but he hasn't been like 17.5 sacks. Great. Like, that's great numbers right there. And again, like, he's really relying on that. 12.3 fantasy points per game was what he was averaging last year, was 17.5 sacks. Dude was just not that involved. Like, he's not involved enough for me to consistently say, like, Josh Hines-Allen, we can expect really good fantasy production from him. So essentially, what we're going to need here for him to be kind of in this range is for him to get at least like 13 or 14 sacks. We'll see what happens. Now, Derwin James here, again, I want to rank him higher And I really do believe that he is a guy who could really rise for me because his ceiling in this Harbaugh defense should be good. Are we past the prime years of Derwin James? I don't know. I'm sure I'll get pushed back for asking that question, but I'm not quite sure we're going to see like much better from Derwin James. I'm not saying he's a bad player all of a sudden. I'm just saying maybe he peaked a little bit. And obviously, if we can get Derwin James for a full season to be healthy, he'll be all over the field for them. But the reality is, like, he played a decent amount of games last year, and he still only averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game. Not bad. Not bad at all. Just not in the range of Jesse Bates, Antoine Winfield type of numbers right there. So just kind of don't believe that he's going to take the leap like a guy like Kyle Hamilton will. But I obviously like Derwin James here right at the back of these rankings. Now, Lavonte David and Will Anderson are at 25 and 26 here. Lavonte David is so old. He feels like the grandfather of the NFL at this point. Like, this dude has been in the league forever. Tampa Bay linebacker, always solid. Always a really, really reliable guy. Question really is, like, when do we see the cliff? Like, is it going to be this year? It could be any time. I mean, this dude is either going to get you like 16 fantasy points per game, and I'm going to sound stupid for having him this low, or he's going to be getting you like 10, 9 fantasy points per game because all of a sudden he gets tired and becomes more of a rotational player. Like, he's on a 1-year deal right now, so the Bucks probably like think that he's closer to done. So like I struggle with Lavonte David a little bit this year. Now, with Will Anderson, similar to Aiden Hutchinson, except I don't quite have as much faith in Will Anderson as I do with Aiden Hutchinson. So with Will Anderson here, good year last year, respectable year in his rookie year, 7 sacks, and the problem is obviously with that tackles number. Gotta get that up, man. Gotta get it up at least over 2 or 2.5. Under 2, we can't have that. Will Anderson needs to be getting more tackles to have a stable floor. Now, I believe that Will Anderson can be a double-digit sack guy this year, especially with Daniel Hunter on the other side. But that tackles number needs to increase this year if he's going to have any shot at getting like 11 to 12 fantasy points per game. Now, moving down to our last tier here, I've got Cameron Bynum at 27 here, one spot over Azeez Al-Shaair of the Houston Texans. So Cameron Bynum, safety for the Minnesota Vikings. On the other side of Harrison Smith, looks like a really, really good player. Like Cameron Bynum, I don't know if y'all saw it. Amon-Ra St. Brown was actually just recently talking about how he got crushed by Cameron Bynum. And Cameron Bynum, like, not only a hard-hitting guy, but also a playmaker. 9 pass deflected, 3 forced fumbles last year, 2 interceptions. Almost led him to 13 fantasy points per game. So again, very similar actually to the Derwin James area, where he was averaging 5.5 tackles per game. So very stable baseline of tackles right there. Can Cameron Bynum make more plays this year? Kind of like his odds, actually. There may be a time where Derwin James actually falls below Cameron Bynum, but I'm not banking on that now because we have a longer track record of good play from Derwin James. Now with Azeez Al-Shaair, obviously Houston Texan now, and looking good in this D'Amico Ryans system right here. All I've heard is positives with D'Amico Ryans on Azeez Al-Shaair. Azeez Al-Shaair obviously is going to shore up the middle of that defense for the Houston Texans. Houston Texans is going to have a pretty good defense this year. Count on it. This defense is going to be really solid. He's going to average close to 5.5 tackles per game this year. And the only problem really is that with Daniel Hunter and with Will Anderson, how much is he going to go on blitzes and get a sack? Or can he get like an interception or 2, or maybe force a couple more fumbles? I'm questioning that just because of how strong that defensive line is, having the opportunity to do that. But obviously on this good defense, I want a player on this defense. Quay Walker at 29 and Trey Hendrickson at 30 round it all out. Quay Walker, Green Bay linebacker. Just haven't seen like elite level play from Quay Walker yet. And like, I think we all kind of know he's a really good player. He's under 25 years old. Like, this dude is set up for success in a Green Bay defense with hopefully a better defensive coordinator this year. But we just haven't seen it yet. It's kind of like how I feel about Drake London, where it's like, I want to see it before I rank him higher. Because Quay Walker really should have a big year. But again, we just haven't seen quite like the Lavonte David, even Ernest Jones type of ceiling. So I just want to see it first with Quay Walker. And Trey Hendrickson, obviously, like, the only problem I really have right now with Trey Hendrickson is that he's kind of doing the like do-si-do dance with the Cincinnati Bengals where it's like, give me a contract. They're like, no. Trade me. No, we won't do that either. It's like, let's get some stability here so I can rank you a little bit higher. But obviously, Trey Hendrickson, if he was to leave Cincinnati, I think it's very good. I do think that he is not dependent on Sam Hubbard, but definitely benefits from having Sam Hubbard on the other side, allowing him to get 17 and a half sacks. But Trey Hendrickson has been a really good player basically since he came to the league. So I really like Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, the tackling floor is low, which is why he has like 10.6 fantasy points per game on a 17 and a half sack season. So good player. Definitely think he will be a good player again this year. Just want to know what's going on with the situation. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 60 overall players for 2024, click on this video right here.